Hello, everyone. Welcome to Urban Shaman. I'm Justin Bear. I'm the new artistic director here at Urban Shaman. My traditional name is Papituqueo, Rolling Thunder, and I'm Cree on my mom's side and Red River Métis on my dad's side. I just started here, been here for about 3 weeks. And yeah, so if you haven't been to Urban Shaman before, and this is for those who are also tuning in live. Urban Shaman Contemporary Indigenous Art was founded in 1996, and it's been committed to serving the needs of emerging mid-career and established Indigenous artists through workshops, residencies, exhibitions, and so this is one of many exhibitions that Urban Shaman has put on for almost over 20 years. And so we're here with Pat Bruderer, Half Moon Woman, for our exhibition, Biting Back Our Cultural Resilience. And it's running from February 2nd to March 16th, 2024. Before I introduce Pat, I'd like to thank everyone who's helped installing this exhibition and putting this together. It was a lot of work. So to the amazing Urban Shaman staff, we have Debbie Keeper, Theo Pelmis, and Angela Ducharme. And then to extra preparators that came and helped. So we have Theo Sims and Zoe LeBron. And to all of Pat's friends who've worked really, really hard on setting everything up and being there for us. So that's Beverly Boucard, Susan Mitchell, and Jillian Mazur. Am I missing anyone else?
Trevor.
And Trevor. I don't know Trevor's last name.
Gifford.
Gifford and Trevor Gifford. And then also to Carolyn Moore for coming and giving us her time and leading a ceremony for us before this event happened and leading it in a good way, which we really, really appreciate. So we're here with Pat Bruderer. Pat's originally from Churchill, Manitoba, and spent most of her life in northern Manitoba. She now resides in the Kootenay area of British Columbia. Pat is a member of the Peter Ballotine Cree Nation and is a self-taught birchbark biting artist who's been practicing for over 20 years. I won't say much more. I'll let Pat introduce herself.
I guess it's actually over 30 years now.
Over 30,
so it's
okay.
a long time. Yeah. So Nina Apita Tipiska Bisumisqueo, Half Moon, and my other name is Pat Bruderer, and I'm a birchbark biting artist. And welcome to my show, Biting Back Our Cultural Resilience. And I'd just like to welcome everybody, and if anybody has any questions, feel free to ask. And thank you to all the people that made my show possible, because there was many people involved to bring this whole show together. It started touring a couple of years ago. It started off at Wanuskewin Heritage Park and then moved to Revelstoke, and now it's in Winnipeg, and hopefully it keeps touring and it keeps changing all the time.
Thanks, Pat. Can you tell us a little bit about the exhibition and the journey that it takes us through the past into the future?
So I guess at the beginning it starts off with housing, because originally a lot of First Nations lived in teepee structures, and a lot of times those structures would probably be better than the housing conditions people live in today, because of poor water, mold, all different kinds of problems that we have with housing, poor materials in a lot of the northern communities, not enough housing and shortages of places to live for people. And then it goes on to the Hudson Bay Company. Our country was built on the fur trade, and there's still the northern stores, and people are in never-ending debt to the Hudson Bay Company, because that's the only place for people to shop, and the cost of living is very high. Also, I have pieces that are talking about the justice system and how there's women incarcerated that use their beadwork to make extra money for their families, and how the system is so broken, and how many of our people are still incarcerated in jail, and there's never good plans for when they're released. And then it goes on to my drums, and my drums represent the heartbeat of the umbilical cord from generation to generation. There's 13 pieces. Then it goes on to the cradle board, how many of our children were lost, and it's the empty cradle board. And then it goes on to talk about, you know, my mom, and how she was lost in the Barren Lands for 9 days when she was 13, and how she survived by walking at night and sleeping during the day. And then my jacket is called Frozen Cranberries because that represents like what she ate, and the caribou hair represents the clothing she was wearing. Then I go on to the murdered and missing Indigenous people, which is still happening to our people today. And then this is my spirit dress behind me, and that represents, I was told by an elder that each bite mark represents a spirit. And so there's hundreds and hundreds of spirit marks on the dress. So that represents all the people that have been lost, and represents, you know, they're in the spirit world, but they still work with us regardless whether they're gone or not. And the men's jacket is the Healing Our Spirit jacket. The jacket there is the Frozen Cranberry jacket. I also have mucklucks that are made from Manitoba mucklucks. They've taken my design, incorporated into the mucklucks. And then I have the hides. I have the buffalo hide that represents the 7 generations of people, and how it's very important to pass our knowledge on to the next generations. I teach sometimes up to 5,000 children a year, and the reason why I started birch bark biting is because I'm self-taught, and first ones I seen were Angelique Morastes. But the reason why I taught myself how to do this art form was because I was concerned that my children and other children would never know what it was. So I teach roughly 5,000 children a year at some time, and so I passed it on, so it will go on to the future. And then I have 7 pieces of my work that are taken from my originals. They're backlight lit, and those are my originals. And they'll never be sold, and it feels good as a First Nations person to say my work is not for sale. Like those pieces anyways, they are in a permanent collection that will go on to the future generations in my family. And then the next buffalo hide is Healing Our Spirit. And then behind it is the future, to retain our language and culture. And then there's a piece called Land Back, and there's another piece called No More Missing People. And then as you go out, it's Healing Our Spirit. So as First Nations people, we're very resilient. And no matter what kind of situations we're in, a lot of times we throw those situations aside and keep moving forward. And that's what I've done in my life, is you know, to try and keep moving forward no matter what, and passing on things to the future generations. And I think I've talked long enough.
Yeah,
you
thanks,
go ahead.
Dad.
I've answered all your questions.
You answered all my
See you later,
questions.
everybody.
No, I got much more.
Oh
Did
no!
A lot of brainstorming.
Oh
no! So for those who can't see the exhibition right now, who are on live stream, we produced a 360-degree video. So that's not up yet. But you can tune in later and then find the video of the exhibition if you're not in Manitoba, or if you're unable to come to Urban Shaman. It's very beautiful. I wanted to ask you a little bit about like how you started and why you were drawn to birch bark in the first place. Because
Okay.
I've been drawn to birch bark too, and I tried harvesting, but I had no guidance, right? And so I
Okay.
didn't know what I was doing, and so I'm curious how you ended up.
Well, I first seen this probably about 40 years ago, but I was a clothing designer to begin with. And my sister and I were designing clothing, and they really discouraged us. They said, you know, like, maybe you guys should just make vests, but that's not true. There was no, and there was only one Indigenous model at that time, and they wanted us to use professional models. So the clothing industry has changed a lot. Now you see more and more people that are designing clothing, and it's getting more into the market, and there's a lot more support. But when I first seen birch bark biting, Angelique Morasti came into the Friendship Center in Thompson, Manitoba. That's the first time I seen it. And when I seen it, I thought, wow, I could never do this. Like, what is this? I never knew that the women from my First Nation were famous for this artwork. I never knew that because I never lived there. I was born and raised in Churchill, Manitoba. So, but when I lived in Moose Lake, Manitoba, I always taught in schools and, you know, shared art. And one of the kids said, well, do you know how to do birch bark biting? And I said, no, I don't know how. I said, but I'll try. So I went to my neighbor's woodpile and started collecting bark. And it's just like I had a mentor, but I couldn't see the person, the mentor. And I started playing around with it. And then pretty soon I just started to get better at it. I lived in a place where I had no phone, no internet or nothing. But people started to contact me because they were interested in my work. And then I started to sell in galleries, and then it just took off from there. And then I started teaching in schools.
Yeah, I've heard of lots of people having that experience where it's like they just felt like they were being taught by someone, or they already knew how to do it. And, and the idea of like blood memory.
Yeah,
and,
that's what I believe. It's in your DNA, and you just got to pull it out of your DNA and bring it forward.
Yeah, so I love the process stuff. Like, you know, because I worked a little bit with birch, but I didn't really know what I was doing. And I always admired birch bark biting. And so I would love to hear a little bit about your process. And you mentioned that you have 13 steps, and it's related to the 13 moons. And that connects to your name as Half Moon Woman as well. So I'm curious, what's your process?
First of all, before I go, like when I go in the bush, I usually go in the spring because that's when all the sap is running in the tree and the water's in the tree. And I offer tobacco. Sometimes it might take me 2 or 3 hours just to find one tree that has little or no knots. And so that's me.
Yeah.
And so, so I look for a tree that has little or no knots. I don't cut deep into the tree. It's not like when you're making baskets where you have to take the inner part of the tree. I just cut the letter I, and then you hear a cracking sound. It's like the tree is talking to you, and then you peel it off. And then I peel layers and layers of bark. And then I sit there and I visualize what I'm going to bite. I bite the design, I unfold it, I burn the edges of my work, I wet it, and then I sign it, and then I frame it.
I love the burnt edges. It's like, it really is a part of like your visual identity as like an artist, and it really stands out.
And that's one of the hardest parts to do, because if a kid comes in and slams the door and you're in the process, your whole piece burns, right?
Has that happened?
Yes, it's happened once. So, you know, you have to be, like, I like sitting alone and doing it when there's nobody in the room, and I can just concentrate on burning the piece. And because you have to breathe a certain way too in order to do that.
That makes sense.
Yeah.
I guess maybe if it like burns up, it's kind of like an offering or something. It's meant to go back to where it came from. So, I really like your when you were talking about biting, and you're not able to see the work itself, and you mentioned that sometimes it's like channeling.
Yeah, it's like channeling an image, because when I'm going to bite a bee, I can only bite 2 wings, a head, and a body. I can't, you know, bite more than that. Like, you really have to, it's a lot to do with visualization. And I don't take it out of my mouth and then look at it. I'm just biting till it's complete, and then I open it.
Do you start with like an idea in your head of what you're biting, or do you bite and it just kind of comes out?
No, I start with an idea, because like I can't start biting a bee and decide, no, I'm going to bite a butterfly, because it'll just come out all distorted.
That makes sense. So you know, there's a lot of bees in your work, and so what's your connection to bees and the bee nation?
Well, if it wasn't for bees, we wouldn't have the food we have today, and if it wasn't for if there was no bees, we wouldn't survive on this planet. And we're in the 11th hour. There's so many things that are happening in the world today, and we have to get together as people and really pull together for the earth, because it's being destroyed every day with all the garbage and everything, and you know, people not getting along, the wars and all that kind of stuff, right? So we got to make a lot of changes and pull together.
And the bees kind of capture
And
that.
the bees capture that, yeah.
So that makes me kind of think, like, you know, how there's so much stuff going on and there's so much pressure, and that idea of, like, you know, Indigenous people being resilient and surviving and passing down that knowledge. And I really love how you teach so many workshops, and you've taught so many kids how to do this practice. And I would love to hear about some of your experiences teaching and the good times, and maybe some of your favorite memories from those experiences.
Well, I was in one school one day, and this little boy, like, I started talking to them about a long time ago when there was no roads and there was no trains or trucks or anything here. And I explained to them, like, how we use birch bark canoes in order to gather food and travel, because we had to travel from place to place. And this little boy, at the end, I said, well, what did you like the most about this? And he said, I like that I learned that there was never anything here before, that all these buildings and roads and all that weren't here before. Like, he said, I just thought they were already here, he said. And I'm so surprised that your people, like Indigenous people, have survived all that time. So that was pretty different for me to hear that. And so there's so much that kids learn in workshops, right? And I think that biting birch bark, anybody can bite birch bark, because we all have teeth, we all have our tools with us. And when you go to schools and you ask children, how many of you think you can do this? A lot of kids put their hand up. And I tell them the only way you can't do this is if you have no teeth, right? Because everybody has different grooves and shapes in their teeth. And once they realize they can do it, like, their faces just light up. They're so amazed that they can create that, right? So that's the really good part about seeing the kids building the confidence that there's nothing they can't do if they just try.
That's so beautiful. You know, one thing I love about the culture is that, like, it always starts with the kids.
Yeah.
You know, like, everything, like the stories.
Yeah.
And like a lot of our traditional practices, like, you can have kids doing it right away. You think about drumming and singing, and then even for hunting, there's like different games that you can play. And you know, one thing that birch bark biting always reminds me of is, like, making snowflakes.
Yeah, for sure.
You know, when you're in school, and it seems like it's a great thing for kids to actually learn, and it's a similar sort of process.
Well, and also, like, it's our mathematics, because when you look at it, it's all halves, quarters, and they recently discovered it develops your spatial reasoning. So the sooner you know how to do birch bark biting, the better you do in science and technology and all that stuff. And our people already knew that, right? And so it's very connected to mathematics. And so I teach them on paper when I'm in a school. And so I teach them making patterns, and they're the same way that because this was done for patterns also. The patterns were bitten and then laid down, and then you do your beadwork. So I teach them how to draw it on paper, and then once they do it on paper, if they want to bite that design, they can bite that design. So that's good, because it challenges them, right?
That's so cool. And you mentioned that, like, it historically it's had different uses, like for, like, you know, documenting songs and ceremonies as well. Yeah, that's really cool. And that kind of reminds me of, like, the birch bark scrolls, like the Medeawin kind of scrolls as well. And like, does anyone have any questions? We have a microphone, and you can throw up some words if you would like.
Does your teeth affect how you?
Here.
Oh,
Yeah. That'll take you online.
yeah, when you bite, does it matter what your teeth are like? Does that affect like the shapes or how the kind of birch bark biting you can do?
No, well, the dentist kind of ground my teeth down on one side. I was not too happy, but it doesn't hurt. Like a lot of people ask if it hurts. It doesn't hurt because it's very, very thin. It's like tissue paper almost. And so it doesn't hurt when you bite down on it. We bite on candies, we bite on gum and all kinds of things. And they put birch bark into toothpaste now because they discovered that it prevents tooth decay and gum disease. So our people already knew that, so the birch bark was used to, chew on for cleaning teeth and stuff. I don't know if that answers.
No, that's a great thank you.
Yeah.
And is there one piece that stands out in your career that means a lot to you?
Yes, it's all of creation because, like I was told that each bite mark represents a spirit, and you'll look at it and it's all folded, so it's all symmetrical. But when I opened it, it wasn't symmetrical. It's like somebody else helped me do it. So the piece that I'm talking about, I wish we could actually put a camera on it, because anyways, what it is, it looks like creators in the middle, all the people are sitting are on the bottom in the middle of the flower, and then there's Mother Earth and all the bees and the water. And if it wasn't for the bees and the water, we would never exist on this planet. So I'll show you that piece once we're done in the talk.
Thank you. And lastly, I'm kind of out of there. Angelique Brasty, did you ever get a chance to talk with her about this?
I just met her and I seen her pieces, and then it was only maybe a year or two after that she had passed, but I never got a chance to go back and talk to her and show her my pieces or yeah, I never got a chance. I only met her once at the Friendship Center in Thompson. But there's 800 pieces in a museum in Toronto that are from the women from my First Nations, from the Peter Ballantyne Cree Nation, yes. And so I'm interested to go and see them and maybe, I don't know, try and get something where we could take back to the communities and show the kids, because there's so much of our stuff that is locked in the archives that our people don't realize that they're there. When I went to Ottawa, I seen hundreds of pieces in the archives of birch bark bitings, but yet 40 years ago I never knew they existed, right? And so what I've done with my pieces too is I've incorporated them into, you can see in my jackets, that's laser etching. So I brought it one step further into the future, where I've taken my design and I've put it into laser etching, and it's gone into material as well. Siltex just put my bitings into material, which is going to be really nice for ribbon skirts and stuff like that. So I can go forward with my clothing designs.
So are people going to be able to buy those fabrics like in different fabric stores?
Yeah.
Amazing.
Yeah.
So.
Oh, this is some right here actually on this cloth here.
Beautiful.
Yeah.
So if you make ribbon skirts, it's going to be your next
it's going to be
pattern.
like birch. Yeah.
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 So nice. So you also have other partnerships, like you've done something for Mini Teepee.
Oh
which
yes,
are the
blankets and shawls as well. Yeah.
Cool. So why do you partner with like these different companies to produce work?
Well, it's to be able to share my work with a larger audience and to put it on different mediums. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Great. So in terms of like people practicing birch bark biting, since you've been teaching it, have you seen, it grow and more artists?
For sure. There's a resurgence. There's so many more birch bark biting artists, and we're all different because we all have different teeth, right? But I guess what I've done is I've been burning it for a long time. The edges, I like it because it's such an old art form, and just burning the edges kind of makes it look old or something. Yeah.
It reminds me of like when you make a paper look old by rubbing the tea leaves on it.
Oh, yeah, yeah.
That's like another thing that also kids do too, which is, yeah, I love that that your birchbark binding is like so accessible for everyone, and that it's growing and it's revived. So, yeah.
And I've passed it down 2 generations in my family, so all my, pretty well all my nieces and nephews and my grandchildren, they're good at it.
It's beautiful.
Mm-hmm.
So in terms of your family, you mentioned earlier a little bit about your history, and it sounds really amazing, and that there's been some documentation of it that's been a bit inaccurate.
Yeah, there has been. There's just stories about my mom and stuff being lost in the Barrens. That's kind of like a story of her being lost for 9 days with no food or water in the winter. So that was quite a experience. And
that was Farley Mowat who wrote that?
Yeah, wrote the story in the book. But there's work being done to change some of that, and I have a lot in my show too that talks about it. Yeah, and there's lots of artists in my family. Like my son is an artist, and I'm related to Biggities as well. So there's lots of artists.
My cousin's married to a Biggity.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's a big family.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Biggity family.
Yeah. That's so okay.
Yeah, so would you like to share a little bit about the graphic novel that you're talking about? Okay. Oh, you don't want to talk about that. That's okay. Yeah. All right. So, is there any other questions that anyone has?
Sure.
Yeah, for sure. Let's throw this up.
Thank you. I'm asking for my friend Samara Harp, who is from Bruderer as well.
Okay.
She's on her way here with a small kid, and she had all the classes today, so she's running late. So I'm going to do my best.
Okay.
Are you here?
Oh, hi.
Okay. Do you want to ask the question, or should I ask you a question? I want to, you weren't here, I don't think, when Pat was talking about the individual bites as spirit marks.
Yep.
Saki bacon, I think that would be the Cree word for it. But we're interested that that's the word for syllabics as well. And Samara has been wondering about the connection, the possible connection between birchbark biting and syllabic characters, because she's noticed that often when you see a star chart, it has all the symmetry and rotation and things that we also see in birchbark biting. So I just wondered if you had heard. Is that a question?
It could have a connection. When I look at birchbark bitings, a lot of times it's like I'm looking from above. I'm looking from above, and it's like you're looking from above, and you can see just like you're almost like you're in the stars and you're looking down. And there's lots of things that I don't know, because like I'm self-taught, but I never had elders to ask a lot of those questions. There's certain ceremonies that they say this was done for, but I don't really want to talk about and share it because I don't know. I have to seek out the elders to ask those questions first. I don't want to say something that I might be wrong, right? I don't know. Yeah. It's like, the thing about birchbark biting, a lot of it was lost, I think, because of residential schools, because a lot of our ceremonies and stories went underground because the children were taken away, and then it wasn't taught, it wasn't passed down. I was told it was passed down in families. So once you take the child away, then there's a breakdown of the family. Yeah.
Thank you.
Happy you're here.